So there are a lot of things that we're going to have to solve as society that come down to just trust, to how our governance structures work, to keeping people accountable, to making sure that we have a more just and fair system that works in the interests of all of humanity, not just a subset of humanity.
What are the risks to the global financial system of excessive monetary stimulus? Well, joining me to discuss this is Farzam Ehsani, who is the head of VALR, a Bitcoin trading platform based here in South Africa. Farzam, what do you see as some of the potential risks and consequences of this excessive monetary stimulus that we've seen in recent years?
I think we're in really unprecedented territory here from a monetary system globally. And I think it comes down to a pretty basic thing, which is we're trying to solve fundamental structural economic problems with monetary tools. All right, and it really comes down to that. So, if you look at countries around the world and you look at their debt to GDP ratios, these are metrics that are creeping up and, in fact, oftentimes rocketing up very, very quickly. And what do? The countries go out and they issue more bonds to raise more money so that they can keep, paying for whatever expenses they have. And then effectively, they're continuously in debt and more so in debt. Now, with an individual, if an individual were in debt, you would do a credit rating on them, a risk analysis, and to decide how much money can this individual kind of muster and afford to pay back. And there's a limit to that. But when you look at a country like the United States, that is currently the US dollar is the reserve currency, they effectively issue the bonds that they want to the market. Those bonds are effectively bought by financial institutions and then on-sold to the central bank, the Federal Reserve, through their open market operations. And basically that's the way that the Federal Reserve brings new money into existence, which is they buy those bonds or other types of securities from the market to inject liquidity into the system. Now, it's staggering what's happened over the past year. About 25%, for the technical people that are listening, 25% of M2 money supply of the US dollar came into existence within the last year. Okay, 25% of all of US dollars that have ever been created in M2 came into existence in the last year. And there doesn't look like there's going to be any abating of that trend. And so what we're seeing, to your point, is the economy is not doing well. We have structural issues. We have economic issues. We have economic disparity issues. And we are trying to solve that by pumping more and more money into the economy so that we have an economy that is hopefully going to flourish, that actual economic activity is going to continue and grow, and hopefully that will contribute to solving some of these problems. The issue is that trend has effectively only served to exacerbate the problem. And so we look at financial assets that are all-time highs, and we look at the disparity between the rich and the poor that are at all-time, like sizes and disparities. If you look at the very, very rich are getting much, much richer, and the poor are struggling more and more. And so this isn't a problem that money can solve. And you can keep throwing money at this, which is really the tools that central banks have. But my fear is that it's going to end in a real disaster. And so we don't have time right now to go into all the solutions per se. But I think that is, to me, one of the major problems is that we're trying to solve structural economic problems with monetary tools that do not work.
Okay, Farzam. Well, it might be appropriate at this point to turn the discussion towards alternative stores of value, and something that you're obviously involved in very closely is cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. How might digital assets serve as an alternative store of value? And could you help our viewers understand this idea of digital scarcity? How does that work? How does Bitcoin itself operate and circumvent some of these problems that you've raised in your first answer?
Great question. So I think Bitcoin is really a phenomenal technology, a phenomenal invention, a phenomenal monetary tool for the world. And to talk about digital scarcity, and very few people really understand what Bitcoin is from that perspective. They look at the price going up and down and they think it's a bubble or not, but they don't understand the fundamentals of it. And I like to just give the example of a photograph, that I have on my phone that I send to you, David. And if I send it to you, you get a copy of it, but I retain a copy, in my WhatsApp, whatever it may be. And it's really wonderful for communication, but it's horrible for value transfer because anything that requires value transfer requires me to not have it any longer once I give it to you. And so in the digital space, 95% of our money in the world right now, plus or minus, is digital already. It's not in physical notes and coins like we think about physical notes and coins, I should say. But the problem with it is that the technology hasn't ever allowed us to hold our own money. So another way of asking that, David, is and very few people think about this, but we have devices to deal with all of our digital things. So we have a computer and a phone to hold our movies, our music, our documents, our spreadsheets. They're all digital. But if 95% of money is digital, then why don't I have a folder for my money? And I'm not talking about a folder for my bank statements. I'm talking about my actual money. And the reason is if I had a folder for my money, then I would be tempted to go into that folder, click Control C and then Control V, copy and paste it, and inflate the amount of money that I have. And I would think that I'm getting very rich because from 100 Rand, I would create 100 million Rand. But the problem is that a fundamental aspect of any monetary tool and any monetary instrument is that it must be scarce. And so if you take this and you multiply it across everybody, because everybody would be doing that, then you effectively inflate the money supply and you crash the value of that currency, and nobody would ever accept it because it's worthless. So Bitcoin is the first time that we're able to solve what's called the double spend problem. And what that means is that I can now have a folder of money on my digital device without relying on a trusted third party, which the current banking system depends on, which is what the current banking system does. And that is done through what's called asymmetric cryptography or public key cryptography. It works with public-private keys. This is where cryptocurrency gets its crypto part of its name from. And it's a very, very powerful tool. And my view is that the future is going to be based on this technology. It's going to be based on these cryptographic means to prove where money is coming from, to prove that it is indeed scarce and that it isn't being created out of thin air. The one thing I will add, David, which is probably not in line with a lot of the people in the crypto industry, is I really don't think that Bitcoin is the solution to all our problems. Right? It's a tool, and it certainly is a monetary tool that is phenomenal. But for those that think Bitcoin alone will solve the world's problem, that span the spheres of political issues, social issues, economic issues, monetary issues, is a complete fallacy, and it is very naive to think that's the case. So there are a lot of things that we're going to have to solve as society that come down to just trust, to how our governance structures work, to keeping people accountable, to making sure that we have a more just and fair system that works in the interests of all of humanity, not just a subset of humanity. So Bitcoin is a tool, but Bitcoin itself actually exacerbates some of those divergences in wealth. If you look at the Gini coefficient of Bitcoin, it will be much higher than some of the most unequal countries of the earth. So let's not fool ourselves also that Bitcoin is a silver bullet to solve all the problems that we've just talked about.
Well, thank you very much, Farzam. We'll certainly have you back on the channel sometime soon to talk about more developments in the cryptocurrency space. My name is David Ansara. This is the Center for Risk Analysis. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel for more of our daily updates. And until next time, take care.